In the heart of the Caucasus lies a land where fire burns eternal, and cultures meet like rivers joining at the sea. This is Azerbaijan. For over 2,000 years, a remarkable story has unfolded here, the story of a Jewish people who found a home among Muslim neighbors. While much of the world has seen conflict and division, Azerbaijan stands as a rare beacon of coexistence. Here, synagogues rise beside mosques. Hebrew prayers echo through valleys where the call to prayer that has sounded for centuries. This is the untold story of Azerbaijan's Jews, a journey of survival, tradition, and harmony. Azerbaijan is a proudly multicultural country in the Caucasus, where diverse ethnic and religious communities have coexisted for centuries. Among these communities, the Jewish people have a unique and long-standing presence in Azerbaijan. Jews have lived in the Caucasus region for over a millennia, and their history in what is now Azerbaijan stretches back to ancient times. Today, Azerbaijan's Jewish community stands out as an exceptional case in the post-Soviet world. Unlike many other former Soviet republics, Azerbaijan is a majority Muslim nation where the Jewish community has flourished in an atmosphere of tolerance and mutual respect. This legacy of harmony, combined with the community's deep historical roots and cultural distinctiveness, makes Jewish life in Azerbaijan truly unique in the region. Ancient and medieval roots. Jewish presence in the Caucasus dates back to antiquity. Legend and historical evidence suggests that as early as the 5th century BCE, Jewish exiles from the Middle East settled in the area of modern Azerbaijan. These early Jews, often identified as the ancestors of the Mountain Jews, may have arrived after the Babylonian exile or during the time of the Persian Empire, finding refuge in the remote mountain valleys. By the early Middle Ages, established Jewish communities existed in Caucasian Albania, the ancient name for parts of Azerbaijan and Persian provinces like Shirvan and Durban. Archaeologists have uncovered a 6th century synagogue in the Shirvan region, attesting to this long presence. Throughout the medieval period, Jews in Azerbaijan often lived in mountainous or remote towns, where they could practice their faith with relative autonomy. Different rulers had varying attitudes toward Jewish residents under certain Persian and Turkic Khanates. Jews experienced periods of tolerance, while at other times they faced pressure to convert. Notably, during the 13th–15th centuries, when the Mongol Ilkhanate ruled the region, religious tolerance was high and Jews participated in economic and administrative life. This was followed by harder times when later rulers converted to Islam and some anti-Jewish edicts were issued. By the 17th century, Jewish villages formed a continuous chain from the city of Derbent in present-day Dagestan down through northern Azerbaijan, especially concentrated in the province of Kuba, the Kuba Khanate and Jewish town. A turning point for Azerbaijan's Jews came in the 18th century under the Kuba Khanate. The Khans of Kuba, notably Hussein Ali Khan and his son Fatali Khan, they offered protection and incentives for Jews to settle in their territory. Fatali Khan invited large numbers of mountain Jewish families to move into the Kuba region, granting them safety and rights such as the ability to own property. Under his patronage, a permanent Jewish settlement was founded just across the river from Kuba city. This settlement, originally called Yevrskaya Sloboda Jewish Village, later became known as Krasnaya Sloboda Red Village after the Russian conquest. By the mid-19th century, Krasnaya Sloboda was thriving with thousands of Jewish inhabitants. It grew into an all-Jewish town, one of the only such towns outside Israel, earning the nickname Jerusalem of the Caucasus. During this era, mountain Jews in places like Kuba and Shirvan engaged in trades such as agriculture, silk production, crafts, and commerce, contributing significantly to local economies. They lived in peace with their Muslim and Christian neighbors. In fact, it is often noted that mountain Jews in Azerbaijan rarely experienced the kind of anti-Semitism seen in Europe. Generations of Jews spoke their own language and maintained their traditions under the comparatively tolerant rule of local Khans. Russian imperial period. In the early 19th century, Azerbaijan was absorbed into the expanding Russian Empire. This brought new dynamics to Jewish life. Under Russian rule, the long isolated mountain Jews came into contact with other Jewish communities of the empire. The Tsarist period also saw an influx of Ashkenazi Jews from other parts of the empire into Azerbaijan, especially after the oil boom in the late 1800s. Baku, the capital, transformed into a booming oil city attracting entrepreneurs, engineers, and workers of many backgrounds including Jews from Russia and Eastern Europe. The first Ashkenazi families arrived around 1811. and by the 1880s and 1890s, many more came seeking opportunity. They established a European-style Jewish community in Baku, distinct from but eventually interacting with the mountain Jews. By 1910, the Ashkenazi Jews in Baku actually outnumbered the local mountain Jews, a testament to the rapid immigration tied to the oil industry. During the late 19th century, Baku became a center of Jewish intellectual and political life in the region. It hosted one of the earliest Zionist organizations in the Russian Empire, with the first society founded in 1899, and had Jewish-run publications. Meanwhile, throughout the 1800s, the mountain Jews across northern Azerbaijan and Krasnodar, as well as towns like Okus, Chamaki, and Gonja, continued to live according to their traditions. Though Russian rule brought modernization like state schools and new economic ties, the Russian Empire's policies toward Jews were complex. While Jews in Azerbaijan enjoyed relative safety from pogroms, they did face some of the same restrictions. For instance, many Ashkenazi Jews were still limited by the empire's regulations, even if Baku lay on the edge of the Pale of Settlement. Nonetheless, the convergence of long-rooted mountain Jews and newly arrived Ashkenazi Jews at the turn of the 20th century made Azerbaijan's Jewish community unusually diverse. Early 20th century in Azerbaijan's First Republic. After the collapse of the Russian Empire, Azerbaijan briefly became an independent state from 1918 to 1920, the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic. In this short-lived First Republic, the government pursued a progressive policy toward minority groups. Jews were granted full rights as citizens, and the multicultural parliament even included Jewish representatives. In fact, two Jewish deputies from the Ashkenazi community served in the ADR's parliament, and a Jewish statesman, Dr. Yevsey Jins, held the post of Minister of Health. During this period, Jewish cultural life blossomed further. Jewish schools, including a popular gymnasium in Baku, operated freely, and newspapers were published in languages like Hebrew, Judeotat, and Yiddish. This flourishing, however, was cut short by the Soviet takeover in 1920. Under the Soviet regime, Soviet rule, which lasted from the 1920s until 1991, had a profound impact on all aspects of life in Azerbaijan, including the Jewish community. On one hand, the Soviet system suppressed religion and shut down many religious institutions. Synagogues were closed or repurposed, especially in the 1930s. Jewish schools were replaced with Soviet schools, and open practice of Judaism was discouraged. Teaching Hebrew or Judeotat was forbidden as part of the Soviet policy that all nationalities should be educated in Russian or local Soviet languages. Many rabbis and community leaders had to practice quietly or risk persecution. Despite these pressures, Azerbaijani Jews found ways to preserve their identity. Mountain Jews continued to speak Judeotat, often called Juhuri, at home, and kept certain traditions alive in family circles. Some clandestine religious practice persisted, particularly around life cycle events and holidays, albeit privately. On the other hand, Soviet rule also brought secular education and opportunities that helped many Jews rise to prominence in society. In the mid-20th century, Jews in Azerbaijan, like elsewhere in the USSR, became highly urbanized and well represented. In intellectual fields, Jewish citizens contributed significantly to science, medicine, and culture. For example, the famous physicist Lev Landau, who later won a Nobel Prize, was born in Baku to a Jewish family and received his early education there. During World War II, Baku's oil and industrial capacity were crucial, and many Azerbaijani Jews served in the Red Army or worked on the home front to support the war effort. After the war, a small revival of Jewish cultural life occurred across the USSR in the 1960s. In Azerbaijan, some Jewish cultural clubs operated discreetly, and by the 1970s, there were even underground Hebrew courses. The Soviet era also saw a demographic peak of Azerbaijan's Jewish population. The 1970 Soviet census recorded over 40,000 Jews in the Azerbaijani SSR, the highest number in modern history, composed of mountain Jews, Ashkenazi Jews, and smaller groups. Late Soviet and independence era. In the 1970s and 1980s, Soviet policy toward Jewish emigration eased somewhat, and a wave of emigration aliyah from the USSR to Israel began. Many Jews from Azerbaijan took this opportunity, especially families who had relatives elsewhere. As the Soviet Union began to crumble in the late 1980s, the Caucasus region entered a turbulent period. Communal tensions and economic hardship affected everyone. In Azerbaijan, The conflict with neighboring Armenia over Nagorno-Karabakh and a rise in nationalist sentiment created uncertainty for minority communities. Some Jews faced sporadic instances of prejudice in those chaotic years, fearing instability, and spurred by the opportunity to reunite with family or seek new futures. Thousands of Jews left Azerbaijan around 1989 to 1991, when Azerbaijan became independent in 1991. The Jewish population was significantly smaller than 2 decades prior. Due to this exodus, however, unlike in some other parts of the former Soviet Union, outright anti-Semitic violence never became state policy in independent Azerbaijan, and the new government quickly affirmed a stance of religious tolerance. By the mid-1990s, Azerbaijan stabilized, and the Jewish community, though reduced in number, began to rebuild communal life openly, entering a new chapter of revival in the post-Soviet era. Azerbaijan's Jews are not a single monolithic group. Rather, the community consists of several distinct subgroups with different historical backgrounds and cultural traditions. The 3 main Jewish communities in Azerbaijan are the Mountain Jews, the Ashkenazi Jews, and the Georgian Jews. Mountain Jews, Juhuri, the Mountain Jews, locally called Juhur or Juhuri, form the oldest Jewish community in Azerbaijan. They trace their ancestry to ancient Persian Jewry and possibly even to the Babylonian exile, having migrated through Persia into the Caucasus many centuries ago. Mountain Jews have lived in the Azerbaijani and Dagestani highlands since at least the Middle Ages, preserving a unique language and way of life. Their language, Judeo-Tat, also known as Juhuri, is an ancient Persian-based tongue written with Hebrew script and infused with Hebrew and Aramaic loanwords culturally and religiously. Mountain Jews adhere to Orthodox Judaism, but over time, they develop distinct traditions influenced by their Caucasus environment. For example, their attire, music, and cuisine reflect a blend of Jewish and local Caucasian elements. Mountain Jews were traditionally farmers, herders, and craftsmen, known for their prowess as skilled carpet weavers and even as fighters when needed. Local lore often praises them as courageous mountain warriors of old. The heartland of mountain Jews in Azerbaijan is the Kuba region in the north, especially the town of Krasnaya Sloboda Kursk. This settlement has been predominantly Jewish for about 300 years and remains a focal point of mountain Jewish life. Krasnaya Sloboda at its peak had several thousand residents and a dozen synagogues. Today it still is home to perhaps 3,000 Jews, making it one of the few exclusively Jewish towns in the world. Other towns like Okuz, formerly Vartashan, and Guba city itself also had notable mountain Jewish populations. The mountain Jews maintain their own religious institutions, including synagogues and ritual baths, and celebrate the full cycle of Jewish holidays while speaking Jewry among themselves, though most also speak Azerbaijani or Russian. They have managed to uphold many unique customs passed down through generations, such as distinctive wedding songs, dances, and certain Kabbalistic mystical practices interwoven in their community law. Ashkenazi Jews. The Ashkenazi Jews in Azerbaijan arrived in the past 2 centuries, primarily during the Russian imperial and Soviet periods. Unlike the indigenous mountain Jews, Ashkenazi Jews originated from Eastern Europe, places like Russia, Ukraine, Poland, and brought with them the Yiddish language and European Jewish traditions. The first small groups came after 1810 with the Russian military and administrative presence. The real growth of the Ashkenazi community occurred from the late 19th century onwards, coinciding with Baku's oil boom. Drawn by economic opportunity, many Jewish families from other parts of the Russian Empire settled in Baku and other cities. They established synagogues and schools in Baku, and by the early 20th century this community was flourishing. Jews contributed greatly to the cosmopolitan culture of Baku. They were heavily represented among the city's professionals, including doctors, lawyers, engineers, and businessmen. Remarkably, on the eve of World War I, it was noted that about 1/3 of Baku's registered medical doctors and lawyers were Jewish, a sign of the community's prominence. During the Soviet era, additional Ashkenazi Jews arrived in Azerbaijan, especially in the 1940s when World War II forced many to evacuate westward Soviet regions. Some Jewish evacuees from Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia decided to stay in Baku after the war. The Ashkenazi community historically spoke Russian and often Yiddish at home, and they integrated into Russian-speaking urban society. They established a Grand Choral Synagogue in Baku in 1910. With the help of philanthropists from various backgrounds, even local Muslim oil barons contributed to its construction, reflecting intercommunal goodwill. Over time, many Ashkenazi Jews intermarried or moved elsewhere, especially during the emigration waves of the 1970s and 1990s today. The Ashkenazi population in Azerbaijan has dwindled to a few hundred individuals, mostly concentrated in Baku. They maintain an active synagogue in the capital and are served by a chief rabbi who is affiliated with the Chabad movement. Despite their smaller numbers now, Ashkenazi Jews in Azerbaijan remain an integral part of the overall community. running their own religious services and cultural activities, often in Russian, and contributing a European Jewish heritage to Azerbaijan's cultural mosaic. Georgian Jews, a smaller but notable segment of Azerbaijan's Juhuri, are the Georgian Jews, sometimes called Ibreli in their own language. Georgian Jews come from an ancient Jewish community of the Caucasus nation of Georgia. Over centuries, some Georgian Jewish families migrated eastward into Azerbaijan, particularly during the 19th century when both Georgia and Azerbaijan were under the Russian Empire, facilitating movement and trade. By the early 20th century, a Georgian Jewish diaspora existed in Baku, where they formed their own cultural club and worshipped at synagogues alongside other Jews. Georgian Jews in Baku typically lived in close-knit neighborhoods and were known for engaging in trade and artisan crafts. Culturally, they brought with them the traditions of Georgian Jewry, which include using the Georgian language written in its distinctive script alongside Hebrew. Georgian Jewish music, dance, and cuisine have their own flavor. For instance, Georgian Jewish cooking includes elements of Georgian cuisine adapted to kosher rules. In Azerbaijan, the Georgian Jews blended in with the larger Jewish community but also preserved their unique identity. They would celebrate Jewish holidays with some Georgian customs, such as specific dishes and songs. Today, the Georgian Jewish community in Azerbaijan is quite small, only a few hundred people, most in Baku. They have their own synagogue in Baku, which serves as a gathering place for Georgian Jewish prayer services and cultural events. Though limited in size, the Georgian Jews add yet another layer to the diverse tapestry of Jewish life in Azerbaijan, exemplifying how multiple Jewish subgroups have found a home in this country. In addition to these groups, historically there were also a few Kurdish Jews and Bactrian Central Asian Jews in Azerbaijan, especially during the early Soviet era, but their presence was always minor. There was even a unique community of Subotniks, ethnic Russians who had converted to Judaism in the 19th century, who were exiled to the southern part of Azerbaijan by the Tsarist authorities. Over time, most of these smaller groups either left or assimilated, leaving Mountain, Ashkenazi, and Georgian Jews as the core of Azerbaijan's Jewish population. Despite their varied origins, the Jewish communities in Azerbaijan share a dedication to Jewish religious life and cultural traditions, which they have maintained through many generations. Throughout history, synagogues have been the heart of Jewish life in Azerbaijan. In the countryside and small towns, mountain Jews established modest synagogues from stone or wood, often indistinguishable from other local buildings except for the Hebrew inscriptions or stars of David adorning them. In Krasnaya Sloboda, for example, numerous synagogues were built over the past 2 centuries. At one point, the town had as many as 13 synagogues serving different neighborhoods and purposes. Many of these fell into disuse during the Soviet period, but a few have been restored and remained active, such as the elegant Altigian BZ6 Dome Synagogue with its 6-arched ceiling, and the Giloki Synagogue. In Baku, the urban Jewish communities built larger places of worship, notably. The Ashkenazi Choral Synagogue, built in 1910, was a major center before the Soviets closed it today. A new synagogue stands on the site, opened in 2003, symbolizing the renewal of Jewish life. Religious practice: Azerbaijan's Jews practice Orthodox traditional Judaism, observing the same religious laws and holidays as Jewish communities worldwide. Even under Soviet anti-religious pressure, many families secretly observed major holidays like Passover, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and of course the weekly Shabbat. Since independence, open religious practice has been revitalized. Today, synagogues in Baku and Cuba hold regular Sabbath services. On Friday evenings, families gather for Shabbat dinners, lighting candles and saying blessings over bread and wine, a scene that is now openly celebrated, whereas decades ago it had to be discreet. Kosher observance is maintained by those who are religiously observant. Kosher meat and other products are available on a limited basis, often arranged through community organizations. In Baku, the community has worked to establish kosher kitchens at the synagogue and import kosher foods, allowing Jews to keep dietary laws. Traditional circumcision, brit milah ceremonies, and bar mitzvahs for 13-year-olds are performed with the help of rabbinical authorities, often visiting rabbis if needed. Jewish education is another pillar of cultural life. There are several Jewish schools and supplementary Sunday schools in Azerbaijan now, including an Orthodox day school in Baku, the Oravner Shabbat School. These schools teach Hebrew, Jewish history, and religion alongside the standard curriculum, ensuring the younger generation can connect with their heritage, traditions, and customs. The Jews of Azerbaijan have rich folkloric traditions that reflect their unique history. Mountain Jews in particular have distinct customary songs and dances. During weddings, for example, mountain Jewish families hold elaborate celebrations with music that blends Caucasian and Jewish melodies, and dances where men and women perform traditional steps in colorful attire. Some mountain Jewish traditions are tinged with mysticism. Historically, they were known to study Kabbalistic teachings and had community sages who were revered for spiritual wisdom. Holiday observances also have local flavor. For instance, on Passover, mountain Jewish women bake a special round matzah and prepare dishes like koyagush, the savory herb frittata, to celebrate the season. On Hanukkah, alongside lighting the menorah, families might enjoy unique treats, such as ash kudu, a sweet pumpkin and rice dish, reflecting local ingredients. Sukkot is another holiday with a special touch. In Krasnaya Sloboda, many homes are built with balconies or courtyards that traditionally doubled as sukkah spaces, outdoor shelters during the festival, allowing families to eat under the stars while protected by the compound's walls. Across all communities, respect for Jewish law regarding the Sabbath and festivals is evident. Even those who are less strictly observant culturally acknowledge Shabbat, some by refraining from work, others by simply using it as a family day. Through these practices, Azerbaijan's Jews maintain a vibrant cultural identity, blending core Jewish religious life with influences from their local surroundings. Jews have been an integral part of Azerbaijani society, contributing in many fields and generally living in harmony with the country's Muslim majority and various other groups, economic and professional roles. Historically, Jewish Azerbaijanis played important roles in trade and industry. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, when Azerbaijan experienced the oil boom, Jewish entrepreneurs and professionals were at the forefront of this development. The world-famous Rothschild family of European Jewish origin established one of the leading oil companies in Baku in the late 1800s, bringing capital and expertise. Locally, Jewish merchants helped connect Azerbaijani oil and carpets to international markets. In everyday commerce, mountain Jews in Cuba and other regions were known as reliable traders of agricultural goods, textiles, and craftsmanship. During the Soviet era, Jews excelled as scientists, engineers, doctors, teachers, and artists. This was partly due to the Soviet emphasis on education and the relative absence of institutional anti-Semitism in Azerbaijan compared to some other parts of the USSR. By mid-20th century, many Jews in Baku held prestigious positions in academia and industry. For example, numerous professors at Azerbaijan's universities and researchers in its famous petroleum chemistry institutes were of Jewish background. The first half of the 20th century also saw Jewish participation in governance and public service, such as the previously mentioned Dr. Yevzy Jins in the 1918 government, and later, Jewish deputies in local councils during the Soviet period. Peaceful coexistence and integration. A hallmark of Jewish life in Azerbaijan has been the peaceful coexistence with Azerbaijani Muslims and with Christians and other groups. Unlike the painful history of Jews in some parts of Europe, Jews in Azerbaijan did not face pogroms or state-sponsored persecution by their neighbors. Local Azerbaijanis, who are predominantly Shia Muslim, often cite with pride the friendship and trust between their community and the Jewish community. In towns like Cuba, Jewish and Muslim families lived as neighbors for generations, visiting one another on holidays and family occasions. The concept of multicultural harmony is deeply ingrained in Azerbaijan's identity. The country's leadership and society alike have long promoted the idea that all ethnic and religious groups are part of one family. This ethos was tested in the chaotic years of the Soviet collapse. But even then, while many Jews emigrated, those who stayed report that they continued to feel a part of the national fabric. Intermarriage between Jews and other groups became common, especially among city dwellers. Nearly half of Azerbaijani Ashkenazi Jews had intermarried by the 1980s, which on the one hand indicates deep integration into society, though it also presents challenges for preserving distinct identity. Nonetheless, Jewish Azerbaijanis have been broadly accepted at all levels of society. A striking example of integration is the story of Albert Agribanov, a young Jewish man from Baku who became a national hero during the First Nagorno-Karabakh War. Agaranov volunteered to serve in the Azerbaijani army and proved himself a brilliant tank commander. He lost his life in 1992 defending the town of Shusha. His bravery earned him the title of National Hero of Azerbaijan, and to this day he is honored by Azerbaijanis of all backgrounds as a symbol of patriotic sacrifice. Such figures highlight that Jewish citizens are regarded as fully part of the nation's story. Notable Jewish Azerbaijanis over the years. Many individuals of Jewish origin have made significant contributions in Azerbaijan. In the sciences, Lev Landau stands out. Born in Baku in 1908, he became one of the Soviet Union's most eminent physicists and eventually a Nobel laureate. Landau's early education in the diverse environment of Baku set the stage for his brilliant career. In literature and journalism, several Baku-born Jewish writers and editors were influential in the early 20th century, helping to publish newspapers and literature in multiple languages. In music and arts, there have been Jewish musicians playing in Azerbaijan's symphony orchestras and Jewish painters contributing to the art scene. One beloved figure is Rashid Behbahoo, a famous mid-20th century singer who was of mixed heritage, including an Ashkenazi Jewish mother. He became a People's Artist of the USSR and remains an icon of Azerbaijani music. In government and public life, Jews have also been visible. Aside from historical figures like Jins in contemporary times, a mountain Jewish politician, Yevda Abramov, served as a member of parliament in Azerbaijan for many years, 2005 to 2019. Representing the Kuba region, he was known not only as an advocate for his own community but also as a voice for Azerbaijan's multicultural values in parliament. These examples underscore that Jewish citizens have been active participants and contributors to Azerbaijan's development and culture, often reaching prominence and earning respect far beyond their community. Preservation of language and customs, while integrating into wider society. Azerbaijan's Jews have also tried to preserve their unique languages and customs. The Judeo-Tat language of the mountain Jews is a vital piece of cultural heritage. Efforts have been made to document it, and in some schools and community centers there are classes or resources to teach Judeo-Tat to the younger generation. The fact that many mountain Jews are bilingual or trilingual, speaking Juhuri, Azerbaijani, and Russian, has helped them act as a bridge between communities. In Baku, the Jewish Cultural Center and various organizations publish magazines in Russian and occasionally in Azeri or Juhuri, focusing on Jewish heritage, helping to keep cultural memory alive. The community also preserves its historic sites. Old Jewish cemeteries in cities like Guba and Baku are maintained, often with the help of local authorities, as they are considered part of national history. Through these measures, Jews in Azerbaijan strive to balance a proud integration into Azerbaijani society with a conscious preservation of their distinct identity. Since Azerbaijan's independence in 1991, the Jewish community has experienced a significant revival and reorganization. Freed from Soviet restrictions, Jews can now practice their religion and celebrate their culture openly, and the Azerbaijani government has generally been very supportive in this regard. Communal revival in the 1990s, as the country stabilized. Jews who remained in Azerbaijan began rebuilding communal institutions. International Jewish organizations, such as the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, JDC, and Chabad, also extended support to the community. Synagogues that had been shuttered were renovated or rebuilt. A landmark event was the opening of a new Grand Synagogue in Baku in 2003, one of the largest synagogues in the entire Caucasus region. This three-story synagogue was constructed with partial funding from the Azerbaijani state and local philanthropists, signifying the importance placed on the Jewish community's presence. Today, Baku hosts three main synagogues: one for mountain Jews, one for Ashkenazi Jews, and one for Georgian Jews, ensuring each group has a dedicated space while also welcoming each other's congregants. In the small town of Krasnaya Sloboda, two synagogues remain active after restoration. Likewise, the town of Oku still has two historic synagogues, though the local Jewish population there is now very small. These synagogues stand as cherished heritage sites and occasionally see visiting rabbis or community members for special occasions. Education and youth. A key element of the modern Renaissance has been the focus on education and youth engagement. A Jewish day school, affiliated with the Avner Shabbat network, was established in Baku in the late 1990s. It provides both secular education and Jewish studies to hundreds of children, and includes a kindergarten and high school, ensuring that the next generation grows up with knowledge of their faith and culture. In addition to this, Hebrew language courses have been introduced, even as early as 1987. Baku offered the first legal Hebrew classes in the Soviet Union, and that spirit continues with Hebrew now taught in some schools and universities as an elective. Youth organizations such as Hillel for university students and Maccabi, a sports association, have active chapters in Azerbaijan, organizing social events, leadership programs, and even trips to Israel. The result is a young generation of Azerbaijani Jews who are more confidently Jewish than perhaps their parents were allowed to be, and who also feel deeply connected to their country. Many of these youths are bilingual or trilingual and see no contradiction in being both patriotic Azerbaijanis and devout Jews. Programs that facilitate cultural exchange and trips, for example. Some youths participate in Taglit birthright programs to visit Israel, help strengthen their global Jewish connections as well. Relationship with the government and wider society. The Azerbaijani government actively promotes the country's reputation for religious tolerance, and the Jewish community's well-being is often highlighted as proof of this policy. There is a state committee for work with religious organizations that oversees and supports all faith communities, and Jewish groups are included in its scope. High-ranking officials frequently attend Jewish community events. For instance, government representatives might join in celebrations for Hanukkah or Passover, and Jewish leaders are invited to national multiculturalism conferences. In 2016, which Azerbaijan declared a year of multiculturalism, the Jewish community played an invisible role in showcasing the country's interfaith harmony. Azerbaijan and Israel also enjoy a friendly relationship on the state level. They established diplomatic ties in 1992, and since then, cooperation has grown, especially in trade and security. Israel imports oil from Azerbaijan and exports technology and military equipment, among other partnerships. This close relationship has indirectly benefited the local Jewish community by encouraging cultural exchange. Israeli delegations often visit Baku's Jewish institutions, and Azerbaijani Jewish leaders are received warmly in Israel. Additionally, Azerbaijan's leadership, while Muslim, has made a point of visiting synagogues. For example, the first vice president, Mariban Alieva, has toured the Red Village and supported cultural preservation projects there. Such gestures reinforce to society at large that Jews are an equal and cherished part of the nation. Contemporary cultural contributions, Jewish Azerbaijanis continue to enrich the cultural tapestry of the country in subtle but meaningful ways. In cuisine, some traditional Jewish dishes have become beloved by more than just the Jewish community. Dishes of the mountain Jews, such as gavek, a slow-cooked stew, or various stuffed vegetable recipes, overlap with Azerbaijani cuisine and are enjoyed widely. The Jewish practice of making certain breads and pastries for holidays like the sweet poppy seed roll on Purim or honeyed desserts for Rosh Hashanah has even influenced local sweet shops in areas with Jewish populations. Music is another area of contribution. A number of Jewish musicians and singers have been active in Azerbaijan's music scene. From classical violinists in the Azerbaijan State Orchestra to singers in the vibrant Mugam traditional music circuit. A notable example is the late Zainab Konlarova, not Jewish herself but often performed songs composed by Jewish songwriters, reflecting collaboration in the arts. In the mountain Jewish community, their folk songs often performed at community gatherings have been recorded and studied by ethnographies as part of Azerbaijan's diverse musical heritage. Joint cultural festivals occasionally take place, such as the Kari Bulbul Music Festival in Shusha, where a Jewish dance ensemble has performed traditional Caucasus Jewish dances, sharing their heritage on the national stage. All these interactions show that Jewish culture in Azerbaijan does not exist in isolation. It both contributes to and absorbs from the broader national culture. The Jewish community of Azerbaijan today stands at a crossroads of both opportunity and challenge. One ongoing challenge is demographic change. The community is much smaller than it was decades ago, primarily due to emigration. Since the 1990s, many Azerbaijani Jews have emigrated to Israel, the United States, Russia, and other countries in search of new opportunities or to join relatives. This emigration continues at a slower pace even in recent years, largely through gradual family reunifications or young people moving abroad for education and then settling there. As a result, the population is aging and its overall numbers have slowly declined. Some estimates suggest there may be around 8,000 to 10,000 Jews left in Azerbaijan, down from the tens of thousands in Soviet times. Assimilation is another challenge, with high rates of intermarriage and Russian or Azeri being the dominant languages. Among the youth, the distinct languages like Judeo-Tat risk falling out of daily use. Maintaining a strong Jewish identity in a secular, multi-ethnic environment can be difficult, especially for those outside the main community centers. To counter these trends, community leaders and members have undertaken various heritage preservation efforts. Education is key. The existing Jewish schools and summer camps instill knowledge of Jewish traditions, hoping to inspire young people to carry on the faith and community life. There are also cultural projects, such as the creation of a Museum of Mountain Jews which opened in 2020 in Krasnaya Sloboda. This museum, housed in a restored 19th century synagogue, is dedicated to the history and traditions of the mountain Jews and is the first of its kind in the world. Its establishment is a point of pride and a deliberate step to preserve and showcase the community's legacy. The museum, along with restored synagogues and historic Jewish neighborhoods, also ties into the potential for Jewish heritage tourism. Azerbaijan has started to promote itself as a destination where tourists, including those from Israel and the Jewish diaspora, can visit a safe and welcoming Muslim-majority country that cherishes its Jewish heritage. Visitors can explore the quiet streets of Red Village, see centuries-old synagogues, and even dine on kosher versions of Azerbaijani cuisine, a unique travel experience. This nascent tourism not only helps the local economy but also encourages the community to maintain their sites and practices with pride. Looking to the future, the Jewish community in Azerbaijan is cautiously optimistic. The Azerbaijani government's continuous affirmation of secularism and equal rights provides a secure umbrella under which Jewish life can continue. Many Jewish Azerbaijanis who live abroad remain emotionally attached to their home villages like Krasnaya Sloboda or their hometown Baku, and some invest in community projects back home. This diaspora link could potentially bolster the community through philanthropy, cultural exchange, or even inspiring a few families to return if conditions allow. Still, to remain sustainable, the community will need to keep its younger generation engaged and rooted in their identity. Balancing integration with preserving tradition will be an ongoing task. There is also interest in expanding outreach, for example. Some community members hope to revive more of the Judeo-Tat language in daily use or to document more of the unique mountain Jewish rituals before they fade. If these initiatives succeed, Azerbaijan's Jews may very well stabilize in number and continue their story into the next generation, albeit as a small, close-knit community.